Oh no, nothing really comes to mind. I was like, cha-ching. Listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be, this should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last, they call them Hitler, they call these things, America rejected them. And instead of coming back and saying, we lied, they instead are now doubling down. So let her keep doing it, because if she keeps that up, we're going to keep getting the Senate and probably the House and the White House, because people see right through your lies. So keep doing what you're doing. Game ball to Sonny.
That's not what I read. The true sign of the apocalypse is someone that dumb has a law degree. Worse, if your name has the word sun in it, there's no excuse for not knowing how an eclipse works. But it's no surprise that Joy is the one who understands science. She's been on the science diet for years.
Sunny Hostin just got roasted so hard by Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus, she might just be rethinking her entire strategy, because what started as another predictable lecture from her seat at the View desk turned into an absolute online inferno. And let's just say, Sunny didn't exactly handle the heat gracefully. Imagine settling into your usual comfortable spot, surrounded by nodding heads and sympathetic smiles, ready to unleash your daily sermon on why everything you disagree with is somehow a global catastrophe or a moral failing, armed with nothing but conviction and a perfectly rehearsed glare. That's Sunny's comfort zone, her battleground of choice, where facts often take a back seat to feelings and a well-timed sigh is considered a compelling argument. But on this particular day, the universe, or maybe just the internet, decided to throw a couple of wrenches into the well-oiled machine that is the View's echo chamber. It wasn't even like Gutfeld and Tyrus were sitting across the table. They were likely miles away, probably in a studio with far less dramatic lighting and significantly fewer synchronized head nods. Yet their impact was immediate and absolutely brutal.
From Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe.
The segment was ostensibly about crime and policing in America, a topic Sunny approaches with the delicate nuance of a bulldozer at a tea party. She launched into her familiar rhythm, painting a picture where law enforcement is the problem. Crime is merely a symptom of societal failure that only she truly understands, and anyone who disagrees is either ignorant, malicious, or possibly both. She spoke with the kind of absolute certainty that can only come from someone who rarely has their opinions challenged with anything more rigorous than a polite disagreement quickly shut down by a commercial break. Her points, delivered with a mix of righteous anger and weary condescension, revolved around systemic issues, historical injustices, and the general idea that if everyone just listened to her analysis, crime would magically disappear, probably replaced by interpretive dance and mandatory empathy workshops. She waved her hands, her voice rising with indignation, laying out her case like a prosecutor presenting irrefutable evidence, even though the evidence often felt suspiciously light on, actual data or real-world results. She leaned into the camera, a picture of performative outrage, ready for the inevitable nods of agreement from her co-hosts, validating her profound wisdom.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that.
But then, something unexpected happened. Clips or references to Gutfeld and Tyrus's commentary entered the conversation, shattering the carefully constructed bubble. It was like trying to have a quiet, scripted play, and suddenly having two stand-up comedians walk onto the stage and start doing crowd work. Gutfeld, with his signature dry wit and ability to dissect absurd arguments with surgical precision, didn't need to shout. He just needed a few well-placed sentences laced with sarcasm, pointing out the logical inconsistencies and often glaring hypocrisy of the viewpoints being espoused. He didn't attack her personally in a base way. He simply dismantled the arguments using something the View rarely engages with: inconvenient truths delivered calmly. He might have said something like, It's fascinating how people who live behind 3 layers of security and haven't seen a non-gated community in decades are the loudest voices telling working-class families they don't need police protection. It wasn't screaming, it was surgical.
Of butter. Sunny gets the game ball. If it wasn't for her, if it wasn't for her asking that question, it might have been a closer election. But when oh no, nothing really comes to mind, I was like, Ching, listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be, this should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last, they call them Hitler, they call these things, America rejected them. And instead of coming back and saying, we lied, they instead are now doubling down.
And Tyrus, he didn't even rely on sarcasm. He brought the receipts. While Sunny was lost in the theoretical weeds of systemic everything, Tyrus was dropping statistics on crime rates in cities that had actually implemented policies similar to the ones Sunny often championed. He talked about the real impact on real communities, the ones he knows from experience, not from a focus group memo. His delivery is calm, almost unnervingly so, which makes his points land with even more force. He speaks with the authority of someone who isn't just reading a teleprompter or rehashing talking points. He sounds like he's explaining basic reality to people who are actively avoiding it. He highlighted the disconnect between advocating for drastic changes that affect vulnerable neighborhoods and then hiring private security details for your own safety. That contrast, delivered without heat or drama, was the true gut punch. He laid bare the privilege that allows some people to theorize about societal restructuring from a safe distance, while others live with the direct consequences.
Their brains are small. But who's the dumbest one of all? True, none of them are in Mensa, but who's the most densa? Perhaps it's Sunny who mastered the art of making idiots look smart. Now, The View could ask a mirror who's the dumbest one of all, but there's no way that glass doesn't shatter. So instead, let's check out this clip from Monday's episode of The View when the ladies put their science caps on and discuss the solar eclipse.
The effect on the View panel was palpable. The air went out of the room faster than a politician leaving a press conference. The synchronized nodding faltered. Whoopi Goldberg, typically the steady hand, looked uncomfortable. Ana Navarro, usually ready with a dramatic interjection or a loud sigh of solidarity, seemed momentarily silenced, perhaps calculating the political fallout. Joy Behar, often quick to jump in with a supportive quip or a redirect, just stared, her usual animated expression replaced by a look of confused silence. It was less a debate and more a collective deer-in-headlights moment. You could almost see the internal processors whirring, trying to compute how to respond to facts and logic when your entire strategy relies on emotional appeals and shutting down dissent. The dynamic of The View is fascinatingly rigid. There's a script, not just in terms of topics, but in terms of acceptable reactions. When that script is suddenly ripped up by reality, the performers don't know what to do. They revert to their default settings, awkward pauses, strained smiles, or a frantic attempt to change the subject.
Oh no, nothing really comes to mind. I was like, Ching, listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be, this should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last, they call them Hitler, they call these things, America rejected them. And instead of coming back and saying, we lied, they instead are now doubling down. So let her keep doing it, because if she keeps that up, we're going to keep getting the Senate and probably the House and the White House, because people see right through your lies. So keep doing what you're doing. Game ball to Sunny.
What made this particular moment so captivating wasn't just the direct challenge, but how Sunny reacted. Faced with points she couldn't easily dismiss with her usual hand-waving or accusations of malice, she did something straight out of the standard progressive playbook. She pivoted hard into victimhood. The moment Gutfeld and Tyrus's inconvenient truth started to land, Sunny transformed from the confident, lecturing expert into someone being unfairly attacked. She accused them of being inflammatory, of using dangerous rhetoric, essentially trying to turn the tables and portray herself as the one being harmed by their calm, data-driven arguments. It was a classic move. When you can't debate the points, attack the delivery or the perceived intent of the person making them. It was like watching someone start a physical fight, throw the first punch, and then burst into tears the second their opponent defends themselves. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Here was someone who routinely makes sweeping, often harsh judgments about millions of people, crumbling the moment someone offered a statistically supported counterpoint to her specific claims.
I think that women, white women in particular, want to protect the patriarchy here because it's to their benefit. They want to make sure that their husbands do well. They want to make sure that their sons do well. They want to make sure that their children do well. And they want to make sure that they do well. Most of the women in some of these studies are married white women, and they do fall in line with what their husbands are doing.
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions? Like you said, and it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist.
The phrase, "you can dish it out, but you can't take it," was practically flashing in neon letters above the set. Sunny Hostin, the queen of the moral high ground, suddenly found that ground was crumbling beneath her feet, and her only defense was to accuse the people pointing out the quicksand of being mean. There were whispers from the co-hosts, frantic looks exchanged, the kind of silent communication that screams, "Abort! Abort!" And in the background, you could almost hear the production team scrambling, debating whether to cut to commercial, throw to a feel-good segment, or just hope the audience didn't notice the entire premise of the debate collapsing in real time. The audience in the studio was reportedly unsure how to react, caught between the expected script of applauding The View's hosts and the undeniable logic being presented from the other side. It wasn't just a bad segment, it was an unraveling.
You don't need to find Trumpers. You need to fire your race baiters.
Yeah.
You need to fire the two races. You've had people. You had a McCain on there. You've had people on there before, and you ran them off. So the racist ones who want to stick to this, Whoopi and Sunny, and was it Bette Midler? What's her name?
And the internet? Oh, the internet had a field day. Clips of the exchange went viral within minutes. Sunny's specific moments of sputtering or pivoting became instant memes. Twitter, or X as it's now called, was flooded with commentary dissecting her arguments, praising Gutfeld and Tyrus, and highlighting the stark contrast in styles and substance. People who have long felt frustrated by The View's perceived bias and unwillingness to engage with opposing viewpoints saw this as a moment of vindication. Hashtags about the incident trended for days. TikTok was awash with short, punchy videos mocking the dramatic reactions and the failed pivot to victimhood. Sunny Hostin became, for a brief but intense period, a symbol of media figures who are disconnected from reality, more interested in performing outrage than engaging with complex issues based on facts.
The problem is that you have to go after the racist people. And if the CEO goes, you know what, I'm not going to allow a woman on my show, or man, that will go after white America and talk about them like dogs. That doesn't represent our ideals or values for anyone. And get rid of those people, and this will clear up real quick. So do you have to actually look in the mirror and clean up your own backyard and get the racist people out? Because that's who you allowed in. You allowed black racists on TV who could just go all day and say anything about white people. And I guess lo and behold, they forgot that there's a lot of people at home, white people at home during the day, that are not watching your show anymore. So just clean it up.
Yeah, Emily.
But perhaps the most revealing part of this whole saga was The View's response after the fact. Instead of addressing the widely discussed on-air collapse, acknowledging the critique, or, heaven forbid, having a more substantive conversation, they did what they do best. They ignored it completely. The very next episodes were a masterclass in deflection and gaslighting. They sailed right past the incident, no mention, no reflection, nothing. They pivoted to the fluffiest, least controversial topics imaginable. There was reportedly a segment about dogs doing yoga, because nothing says, we are serious journalists engaging with the world's complex problems like watching puppies stretch on mats. It was a clear signal. We don't engage with criticism, we don't admit mistakes, and we definitely don't platform viewpoints that challenge our established narrative, even if they come armed with facts and logic. It was a deliberate choice to pretend the moment of public intellectual vulnerability simply didn't happen, hoping their loyal audience would either not notice or actively participate in the collective amnesia. It must be exhausting to maintain that level of detachment from reality, to constantly perform a version of wokeness that crumbles under the slightest pressure, all while pretending to be the most informed people in the room.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
This incident wasn't just about one bad segment for Sunny Hostin. It was a microcosm of a larger problem in media, particularly in spaces like The View. It's an illustration of what happens when opinion is prioritized over information, when comfort inside an echo chamber is valued more than challenging ideas, and when the performance of outrage replaces actual, substantive debate. Gutfeld and Tyrus didn't just deliver a verbal smackdown, they held up a mirror to the limitations of a certain style of political commentary, one that relies on shutting down opposition rather than engaging with it. Sunny's reaction, her rapid retreat into accusations of hostility when faced with factual counterpoints, spoke volumes. It reinforced the perception that for some, it's not about finding solutions or understanding different perspectives. It's about maintaining a position of perceived moral superiority at all costs, even if it means ignoring reality.
Everyone knows the moon caused the eclipse, which is controlled by the View's gravitational pull. Hints of this, will she continue to do that when she is now one of them, Dana? And it is funny, she's so wrapped up in identity and she had no idea who she was.
So, while The View quickly tried to sweep the awkwardness under the rug with segments about stretching puppies and celebrity gossip, the moment Sunny Hostin's carefully constructed facade cracked under the pressure of simple logic and inconvenient data lives on online. It serves as a stark reminder that in the battle between well-rehearsed talking points and the unfiltered truth, sometimes, just sometimes, the truth manages to land a knockout punch. And it was glorious to watch. The collapse wasn't just hers, it was a tiny fissure in the wall of the echo chamber, letting in just enough reality to make things deeply uncomfortable for those inside. And you can bet people will be watching the next time she decides to step onto that particular soapbox, because the internet doesn't forget, and reality, eventually, always shows up.